what's up YouTube? Musty Hobbit here, and I recently got back from the Midwest Gaming Classic. It was the first time I've attended an event like this, and I'm pretty happy with what I came away with. So I wanted to share today were my pickups from that event. Now, as you know, I have a couple of primary systems that I'm collecting for, if you can't tell it right back here. So I do have a couple of games for each of those systems, but I also had a couple just general pickups that I wanted to share as well. So we'll go through those sort of mix and match, then we'll hit the Xbox, the NES, and then we'll end with the Super Nintendo games. Funny enough, the last thing that I acquired over the weekend was on my way home. My parents happened to be on the way back to Iowa, so I stopped by, and they had actually picked up a couple of games for me that they found at a half-price books, and those were copies of Donkey Kong for the 2600, and a copy of Pitfall for the 2600. Both of those are games I did not have yet, so I'm happy to have those, and it's always nice to have people looking for you, you know, when they're out and about, and when they can find things that are decently priced, you know, willing to pick them up for you. That's always a great thing. Another thing that I got that wasn't actually at the convention was I was staying with my sister who lives just outside of Milwaukee, and then her fiance actually gave me this, and it was the issue number 10 of Retro Magazine, which is has the Star Wars cover on it. I have not taken a read through this yet, but he said he was done with it, and I was more than happy to take that off his hands. He said he didn't want it, so pretty happy to have that. So far the quality looks pretty good. I like these magazines. They're fun to look at, and it'll be fun to look back at as well, I'm sure. So let's get into the show. I had to pick something up. I have a 2-year-old son, and he's just getting to that age where he's not yet coordinated enough for me to put a actual console game in front of him. But I found something that I thought might bridge the gap a little bit. So I actually picked up a copy, a Game Boy Color edition of Bob the Builder. He is actively watching a fair amount of this, so I thought it might be worth a shot to see if it's something that he might pick up. Fix It Fun, Bob the Builder, for the Game Boy Color. The other game that is not for, again, my primary systems is a game that I remember playing when it launched. It launched on a Nintendo console, was later ported to pretty much everything that is out there, and even still is getting remasters and HDs and versions and things like that. It was in a really nice, clean, complete copy of Resident Evil 4 for the GameCube. It's in really good shape as far as that goes. This was actually a Cartridge Club game 2 Octobers ago, and it was pretty controversial, just based off of some of the reception. I really enjoy the game. I realize, and being as I hadn't really played the first 3 Resident Evils, I played a portion of 2, but really hadn't sort of established a perception yet of what Resident Evil was. I really dug this game, and so I'm glad to have that and be able to add that to my growing collection. So now we'll dive into the Xbox stuff. The first 4 games I picked up were part of basically a bin full of games. They had, priced individually, or you could, buy multiple and get a little bit of a discount. So I did pick these up. They came out to 4 for $10 on this. So we've got, and they are all complete as well. We have X2 Wolverine's Revenge, which I haven't really gotten into the X-Men since really the first movie. So this one, as far as stylings on the back, looks very much more cartoony, almost cel-shaded look to it, which kind of fits more with the old cartoon. I'm hoping that's a little bit of what it is, but we will see about that. The next game is Flat Out, which is a driving game, but the purpose of the driving game is more about launching your driver. So there are some mini games, things like darts and bowling and sort of a long jump type of thing, where the intent is to crash the car, launch the driver out of the windshield and see how far you can send them, and there's ragdoll physics and all kinds of things. Kind of like if Burnout was more of a destruction derby type game, I think that would be more along the lines of what Flat Out is. So, good to have that. Next one is an exclusive for the system, which is one of the things that I am really looking for my Xbox collection, and this is a copy of Brute Force, which is a really early title. I think in some cases there were bundles that had this with it as a launch title, and I may be mistaken by that, but sort of a squad combat, people with different powers and abilities. Looks kind of like it looks kind of derivative for the time, but it's something that I recall playing System Link at my friend Brad's house. I would bring my Xbox over, we would link them up on different TVs in different rooms, and we'd play things like Brute Force or Crimson Skies or Halo, because that was how you had to do it back then. So Brute Force. And then the last one is one in the line of a series that I have yet to really dabble in. This is a Legacy of Kain, Defiance. Again, really nice copy of that. I've not played a lot of this, but I understand it's a third-person action type game with, again, mechanics that I have not had any time to really put into, but Legacy of Kain was the last of that first deal. Had a couple other titles that I picked up, and some of these I picked up, because they either were Cartridge Club games, and I really want to kind of pick up everything that's been played so far. Some of the, this one, for example, is Half-Life 2, and I played this a few different times, but it was a really nice copy, and it was only $5, so I really couldn't pass that up. So very happy to have more Gordon Freeman in my life. This next one is actually going to be September's Game of the Month, and this is the Xbox version of Beyond Good and Evil, which many will argue is the definitive version of Beyond Good and Evil, and I will tend to agree with them. I'm really looking forward to this. I had this game digitally on the 360. They did an HD version of it, but I really want to play it on original hardware. I'm really looking forward to this for September. And then the last Xbox game I picked up was one that I had joked about wanting to pick up. I wasn't really looking for it, and this was actually the last purchase that I had made in the day with the last funds that I had available to me. And that was a copy of Kung Fu Chaos. Again, another system exclusive, and this one plays out like a Kung Fu action movie, but also like a party game. So almost kind of like Smash Brothers set in a Kung Fu action movie. I hear it's a little borderline on some stereotypes, which is not unique for the system. Games like Cell Damage and Freaky Flyers are right in line with that. So I'm glad to have this. I need to actually play it to see how bad it is with regards to that. But I hear it's a lot of fun. I hear the game's a lot of fun, nevertheless. So those are the Xbox titles. And let's jump into the NES. So I picked up 3 different NES games. And as you know, my list on NES is getting kind of thin for that top 100. So finding ones that didn't break the bank was important. So I managed to find this one, which at first glance will look kind of strange. and that's because it is a Camerica game. It is Micro Machines. And this is an unlicensed title. That's why there is no seal of approval on there. It is a very much a strange looking cartridge. There is a toggle switch back here, all to get around the sort of protection that the NES has. So Micro Machines, which I believe was the highest rated game on the list that I had left to get. So I'm glad to have found that. Another gold cartridge to go with my Zelda and Zelda 2. The next two games I actually bundled together. The guy came down a few bucks on price, which I was pretty happy about. But the first one is one that I have heard other Cartridge Club members bringing up lately, but it is Vice Project Doom. Have not had a chance to play this yet, so I know there is some platforming involved, and I believe there's some different gameplay elements that I need to really get a feel for, but check out the cover art, it's pretty amazing. So that's Vice Project Doom. So the last of the NES games that I picked up actually has a little bit of history behind it. There's some etching on the back of it here. It's from Hogan's Video in Payette, Idaho. Unfortunately, the etching is going to make it really hard to... I'm not going to be able to take that out. But that's okay. I think sometimes little things like that show a little bit of history for the cartridge is actually kind of fun. This one is one that I've been looking for a while. This was originally intended to be a Terminator game. Those of you who have heard that fact already know exactly what title this is. It's supposed to have one of the better soundtracks, and of the Sunsoft titles like Batman, it certainly won't disappoint as far as that goes. So I'm happy to add Journey to Silius to the collection. Again, like I mentioned, this was a Terminator game until the last minute, and I believe the license ran out, or they lost the license somehow and then had to kind of figure out what to do with their game. So they turned it into a post-apocalyptic, side-scrolling shooter / platformer, and so now I have a copy of that. And surprisingly, for it being a rental copy, which is what I assume this Hogan's Video is, label's in really good shape. So happy to have bundled those. Again, I got a couple bucks off for bundling both Vice Project Doom and Journey to Silius. So that is all of the NES titles, and that brings me to I believe it's 88 of my top 100 games. Definitely getting down to the last few, and I'm hopefully I missed out on a copy of Power Blade, the first one, and unfortunately I just was at a point where my budget was pretty much tapped. I tried to trade off some stuff, and they just weren't having it, which is okay. I can deal with it. I will eventually find a copy of that game. Maybe I'll even find it for less than what I would have had to spend at the convention. But again, I'm pretty happy to be where I'm at with the NES. I did not think that I would get this close this early in the year, I think, because I tentatively set my goal at like 90 for this year on that list. So the last of the games is the Super Nintendo, and this is the list again that I had a lot going for me. You know, I just recently hit 60, so I wanted to knock off some of those low to mid-range games, ones that maybe aren't super common, but they're ones that aren't super expensive, because there's a lot of expensive right now. The SNES is just super hot, so there was a lot of big time trading going on. I saw a couple of copies of Evo. I saw a couple of boxed Chrono Triggers and things like that, and I just wanted to be reasonable. But I found a total of 5 titles for the system, which I'm pretty happy about. So we will look at each of those. The first of which is Jungle Strike, which people tell me is better on the Genesis, but I don't have a basis for comparison. So I'm looking forward to playing this. This is one of, I believe, Urban Strike and Desert Strike are the other two in the Strike series. We are a military helicopter. Haven't played a ton of it, so I really don't have a basis for any kind of description aside from that. So I'm happy to add Jungle Strike to the collection. The next one I actually traded for. Funny enough, I traded this with Grimsy42 of YouTube. He was there with some sellers. Again, I don't know who they are, but I managed to work out a trade for a couple of Mario Duck Hunts that I had gotten in a recent pickup. But I got a copy of Flashback, The Quest for Identity. And this is a cinematic platformer, a lot like a Prince of Persia or Out of This World, which is one that is also on the list, and I was actually trying to find that one for a while on Saturday. But I'm happy to have this. It's the box art was touting the fact that this was the first CD-ROM game on a cartridge, so they managed to cram all of that data from those CD-ROMs into this little cartridge here. So looking forward to playing that relatively soon. The next two I actually bundled together, so I got a little bit of a price break on these. He had them both priced pretty competitively right now as it was, but the first of which is Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Label is okay. I really only played Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. 3, they introduced the run button, and a lot of the other sort of, they go beyond the extreme fatalities that Mortal Kombat 2 had. Again, I haven't played a lot of the Mortal Kombat series since then, so this one, though, has a pretty big lineup of characters, so I'm looking forward to playing some of this. And the other one that I got from him actually completes I guess you could say, a mini subset for me. I now have a copy of Earthworm Jim 2 to go with my copy of Earthworm Jim 1. So I now have both Earthworm Jim games for the Super Nintendo, and again, I got a pretty good deal between those two on that. So pretty happy. I believe that was from Cerulean Games. I believe they also have a channel. He was nice enough to take in some trade for me as well. So the last game I have, and this was the big one, and it was funny because I was wrestling with the thought of picking this game up at all when this was my first purchase, and I was really reluctant to dip into the wallet so quickly. I basically walked in the door and was about to drop a pretty good chunk of my budget. Thankfully, I had some trade. I know I had mentioned that Conquer Live and Reloaded for the Xbox. I had also found a copy of Pokemon Heart Gold in really good shape, just missing the Pokewalker. So I actually traded those two pieces and some cash and picked this up. But this is something that I've been talked at length about Final Fantasy, and this was the big one for me, and the one that I didn't know that I would find in decent shape, let alone the shape I did. But we officially have a copy of Final Fantasy 3. It came with this nice little box cover, much like my copy of Final Fantasy 2. We have everything in here except the map, which was the same for Final Fantasy 2, so that's kind of coincidental, which I think I'm okay with. If I happen to stumble across the map, that's fine, but I've taken the game out. I'm going to try and keep these in as good a shape as possible, so what I'll do is I'll put the cart for this and my Final Fantasy 2 and my Mystic Quest. I want to put those in universal game cases and store those with the rest of the Super Nintendo games, just so I can more easily access it. But I'm extremely happy about this, and this set my whole weekend up, and I'm really happy. I do want to thank it's rocket sauce for having scoped this out for me. This, I think, was the only complete copy in the convention. So I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty ecstatic to have gotten this. This game is touted as one of the best, and I have a copy, so I'm pretty happy here. So, I mean, all in all, I would say I think I had a pretty productive Midwest Gaming Classic. I am very much looking forward to next year. But, I mean, before we get there, we've got some other stuff coming up. There's in June, there is an event for Iowa Retro Gamer Nation taking place at the homes of one of the admins. So I'm looking forward to going to that. There looks like, and this has just changed in the last couple of days, but it looks like we are full steam ahead for going to Portland. So barring any changing circumstances, I am going to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and I could not be more happy about it. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm definitely planning ahead. I will be bringing a much larger budget than what I brought for this, and I'll also be staying for the entire weekend. Keep in mind that Midwest Gaming Classic also goes into Sunday, so I didn't stay for the whole show. And I know that usually that last day is the time when you can really get some pretty steep discounts with the vendors. Unfortunately, I needed to get home. It was already a long weekend as it was, a lot of driving. So, but I had a really good time, and again, could not be happier about some of the things that I managed to find. So. Anyways, I'll leave you there. If you have only found my video because you were looking up Midwest Gaming Classic, welcome. Please take a look at some of the other videos I have. I am in the process of evolving some of the content in my channel, and so there should be some newer seeming things coming up. But I do have again a fair number of pickup videos. I do collect primarily for the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo, and the Xbox, as I've mentioned. So, please let me know what you think. Have you played any of these NES games? Is Journey to Silius as good as I've heard? And then tell me a game that you can think of that takes stereotypes a little bit too far. Not that I'm a fan of that. Just curious. So anyways, thanks for coming by. I've been Musty. Take care of yourself and be good to each other. Bye.